Check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9, 8.
Actually, it's probably my parents. No teleprompter. Yes. That's him. Not really. My kids cannot get college these seasons. He just loves it. I have two. The senior that goes to Boston College. He's graduating sophomore. Cincinnati. So they're the first to know that that's the sweet. We went to the Boston College and Notre Dame played, and that was really tough. So I wore my BC sweatshirt on Notre Dame. So I did that. No, we're blessed. My oldest is graduating, and he has a full-time job there. BAYE healthcare as a Marriott. Yeah, he's going to work in sales. And then my youngest, Alex, he's studying finance and math. He's been math. So he's still trying to figure it out. They work every summer. You know what? They know the value of tornado. It's all good. It's all good. Just keep in mind and help. You can probably go through it.
Yes.
done that. You guys have done them in the right direction. After that's their life. Well, you know what's fun? I mean, they can't. This is the first time they came that far. My wife was I kind of enjoy my empty nest. She's a little different. Dave. It's the beast. But you end up quiet. Because when they're home, you worry about, you know. Was it? Just the one. Yeah, yeah, they're owned by the same company, but totally different. Totally different products. So now I need to figure out. She hates this. Yeah, oh, she hates it. You gotta shake it up a little. Yeah, I love it.
Boy, Sienna puts a bounce in my step and a pitter-patter in my heart. Thank you very much. Say it again.
You're welcome.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I'm Jeb Bradley. It's been an honor to have served New Hampshire in Congress, again in the state Senate. I have to say it's really a pleasure to be back in this room here at the American Legion Hall in Rochester, where I spent a lot of good evenings with friends who've served our country. I think everybody who's a veteran, stand up so we can give you a round of applause. You know, Governor Christie is one of the most persistent people I know, which is a good thing when you're going to Washington. He called me all summer long, and actually, believe it or not, he listened a heck of a lot more to me than he talked to me. He wanted to pick my brain, know what I thought was important in how New Hampshire looks at presidential candidates. I told him to come here and talk to all of you in town hall after town hall. It's number 47 tonight, and I got it right. I got it wrong last night. He corrected me. I thought it was 42. It was 46, so I didn't forget it. You know, and I told him several things that I thought were really important. I said, you know what, Governor? You got to talk about your national security credentials. And this was, you know, before the problems in Paris, before San Bernardino, but it was after the president had called ISIS the JV team. And I knew, and Governor Christie obviously knew, that keeping America safe was going to be front and center in this presidential campaign. And there is no one who has the national security credentials of Governor Christie. And second, and what really meant a lot to me also, just as important, we have $18 trillion in debt and deficit. And young women like Sienna are going to inherit this problem if we don't do something to fix it. And so we got to tackle entitlement reform, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. It's a must-do. Governor Christie's the only one that laid out a plan of all the presidential candidates to do it. That takes courage. But having the political courage to lay out a plan is not enough. You got to have the ability to get it done. And I know Governor Christie can get it done because he led the pension reform efforts in New Jersey. Talk about a heavy lift. Talk about doing something that's difficult. I know because I led the same charge here in New Hampshire. I watched a lot of YouTube videos about how he talked about it. I learned a lot, so I already knew that he was my guy. It took me a while to say so, but I knew it. Those are the reasons why I'm supporting Governor Christie. You'll hear a lot of other reasons from him tonight, but another thing that to me is very important. Look, we all maybe call ourselves conservative in this room tonight, but not everybody in America is a conservative. And so when you're the governor of the bluest state in the country, you've got to be able to work with people. You've got to know when to say, yes, let's get this done. I'm not going to sacrifice my principles, but other people have principles too. Governor Christie has proven that he can get the job done with tough, tough issues, and everybody goes home feeling good about it. That's what we need in Washington. We haven't had that in 8 years. We haven't had somebody who is willing to reach out to people that disagree with him. Governor Christie has done that, and that, to me, is the third leg of the stool of why he should be our next president. So I'm going to give the microphone to a local rock star here for another introduction. Jeff, stand up. Jeff Chittister, ladies and gentlemen, here we go.
Hey guys, you don't want to hear us talk, so real quick, how great is this, huh? In New Hampshire, 9 degrees outside, and we're here to pick the next future leader of the world. Not just America, but that presence in the White House extends well beyond those borders. And it's an honor to be here today with you, my friends, my neighbors, as a Rochester resident. You allowed me to proudly serve you in the U.S. Army, and I thank you for that. You also gave me your trust when I served as a police officer in these communities, and I appreciate that. Every week when I write my article and I do my radio show and you guys email me or come up to me and say, thank you for saying what you said, I always remind you that's not my voice. It's your voice. It's you. It's the essence of what we are in New Hampshire. So when I stand up here before you tonight, I could tell you the governor's resume, and it's an impressive one. But the most important thing you need to know is this, is that all that trust you put on me, all that faith you instill in me, is something I hold very sacred. I don't stand before you saying that I'm endorsing this man to be the next president of the United States out of anything other than absolute knowledge of knowing this. We need Governor Chris Christie as the next president of the United States. On September 10th, 2001, the governor was appointed to the U.S. Attorney.
Did you come see me in my chambers? I said, of course, Your Honor. And I'm like, I did so well that he wants to call me back there to compliment me for how well I did. I'm 1-0. I'm really doing great. And so I went back to his chambers, and he said, it was winter, like I said, it was December, and he said, do you have your coat? And I said, I didn't wear a coat today, Your Honor. Just wore my suit. And he said, all right, let's go take a walk. Now, he's got 80 lawyers in the courtroom waiting for him. And I said, of course, sir, absolutely. So he walks me out this back door. We're at the back door of the Hudson County Courthouse in Jersey City, New Jersey. And we walk around the back of the courthouse to the front of the courthouse. And he said, Mr. Christie, he said, this was your first time in court, wasn't it? And I said, yes, Your Honor, it was. And he said, and when I interrupted you, what did you think? And I said, well, I just thought, Judge, that you wanted to ask me a question, and when you didn't ask me a question, then I figured I should just continue. So that's one way to have looked at it. He said, what I was trying to signal to you was that I had already decided. Like, I'd already decided you won. And he said, and the more you kept talking, when I have 80 lawyers sitting in the courtroom, the more I was thinking to myself, this guy is getting me angry and annoyed. He said, so I brought you out here because I want to show you something that I want you to always remember for the rest of your legal career. I said, yes, Your Honor, now I know I'm not doing so great. And he said, when you walked in the front door of the courthouse today, did you look at what it says over the courthouse door? I said, no, sir, I didn't. And he said, well, why don't you look right now? And over the courthouse door in Hudson County, it says, when you stand well, stand still. He said, thank you, Your Honor. And I dejectedly walked back to my car. After hearing Senator Jeb Bradley and Jeff Chittister introduce me tonight, I was thinking to myself, I can't do better than that. When you stand well, stand still. You should just go sit down and say, thank you very much. I rest my case. I want your vote. Thank you and goodbye. All right? Man, I was like, man, I'd vote for me after that. That's really good. To New Hampshire, 9-degree weather. I'm glad to see we're back because I was here in December for 4 days right before Christmas on a bus tour. And I watched presidential campaigns, presidential candidates with coats and gloves on and trudging through snow and freezing and, you know, the air coming out of their mouth and everything. I'm like, this is what I get? I get like in the 50s in New Hampshire in December. So I'm glad when I came back right after all restored my faith in New Hampshire winters are like, and we're ready to work the next 5 weeks to finish the job here in the New Hampshire primary. We've been coming since the spring. And I did take Jeb's advice. When I asked him what's the best way to do well in the New Hampshire primary, he said to me, Governor, come here, talk to people, tell them your ideas, and let them get to know you. And they will take the time to do that. And it was the best advice I've gotten from anybody in New Hampshire so far at the beginning of my campaign, because that's exactly what we've decided to do. This is our 47th town hall meeting tonight, and we're really happy about that. And, you know, there's a bunch of things I could talk about off the top. I took my time in the beginning to tell you the goofy story about me and my first argument in court. I'll just end with this because I want to really spend the rest of the time taking your questions. I've done a number of radio and TV shows today, and I'm being asked a lot about the President of the United States and the actions he took today or proposed today regarding gun control and the Second Amendment. and a number of the other comments that he's been making over the last couple of days. I gave a speech at St. Anselm's yesterday, and I called the president a petulant child. And that is what he looks like to me. I want you to think about the job you need to finish here now, starting in New Hampshire in 2016. In 2008, when Barack Obama was elected, he was elected with an overwhelming majority of Democrats in the House and with a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, 60 Democratic United States senators. And then Barack Obama went to work instituting his vision for America. And what's happened since? In 2010, the American people said, no thank you on that, and they took the House away from him and put Republicans in control of the House of Representatives. And then in 2014, they ended his majority in the United States Senate. And now we have a Republican majority in the United States Senate. And in the meantime, between 2008 and 2014, we went from 21 Republican governors in America to 31 Republican governors in America. A net addition of 10 new Republican governors, and we control more legislative chambers in states today than the Republican Party has controlled since the 1920s. Now, if you're a breathing, thinking, listening, humble human being, the message is the American people don't like my policies. They don't agree with my policies. And I need to do, as Jeb mentioned in his opening, everybody has principles. And I have to now adjust as a leader to what the people are saying to me. He does not. He says, you took away Congress from him, he'll go around Congress. You don't like his policies? Then we're not going to listen any longer to the people. We're just going to do what we want to do here in the White House. And that's an extraordinary statement in a democracy. The people have spoken, and this president now wants to go around the people through executive orders on immigration, through executive orders now on guns, through executive orders that he's put forward before on Obamacare, where he just changes the rules as he goes along. By executive fiat, the President of the United States believes he's a king and that he can issue edicts. That is not what this country is about. This country was formed to avoid that. And so I say he's a petulant child because, any of us who are parents who have had to discipline our children know often what their initial reaction is. They look for a way to get around the punishment because they know better than we do. Now, we know they don't, and they eventually learn they don't. The problem with this president is he'll never learn. There's only 1 year left, thankfully. 1 year and a few days now left in this presidency. Today is, the 5th of January, right? So we've got 1 year and 15 days to put up with this, and then it'll be over. Let me tell you that what my presidency will be like, because I am a former prosecutor, and I believe in the rule of law. I will enforce the laws of this country without bias or prejudice, and I'll even enforce the laws I don't like. See, because I don't get to choose. The oath I took as governor was really clear. One of the lines in there was, I swear I will enforce the laws of the state of New Jersey. It didn't say, I'll enforce the laws that I like. It was like, I have to enforce all the laws. And there are laws in New Jersey that I don't like. But I have two choices, enforce them or change them. To change them, I got to convince the legislature to change them and send them to me. I can't just do it on my own. And absent being able to do that, your option under the law is to enforce the laws. This president rejects that and did that again today. The American people have to raise their voices. Once again, there's one final job to finish. We've taken the governorships. We've taken the state legislatures. We've taken the House of Representatives. We've taken the United States Senate. There's one job left. We need to take the White House to bring the change that we really need and want and have been asking for now since 2010. So if you know that's the job, and that the risk of losing that opportunity is to have more of this, because believe me, Hillary Rodham Clinton will act in exactly the same way, if not worse, than Barack Obama. So if we know that's the task ahead of us, we better nominate someone who knows how to win. There are no silver medals in this business, everybody. Unlike what happens in Atlantic City, in my state, once a year, when we crown Miss America, there is no first runner-up, right? The first runner-up gets to serve if Miss America can't serve. That's not the way it works in our presidential elections, as you know. You lose, you go home. And the other person gets all of it. We cannot afford to lose. And when I see Republicans attacking each other on our stage, I say to myself, what are they thinking? I don't agree with all the guys and the woman on the stage with me in this Republican primary, and if I did, I wouldn't be running. But the differences I have with Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio, with Carly Fiorina, or with Rand Paul are relatively minor compared to the differences that we have with Hillary Clinton. And so I'm going to remain focused on the job that matters, which is to put us in the best position to defeat Hillary Clinton in November. Because if we don't, we won't recognize this country in 4 years. We won't recognize it. This is a woman who has been a radical liberal since she left Yale Law School. And we need to understand that. And so, everything you see me doing will be calculated towards that goal. I will not permit myself to be distracted by rantings and criticisms from other candidates. Here's the good news for you, though, if you're here as a supporter. They're starting to rant and criticize me. That means we're winning. Right? That's what that means. And for those of you who are here tonight and still undecided, this is the time to buy. This is the time to buy. And we're not going to allow ourselves to be distracted. I bring greetings from Mary Pat, who was with me in the last couple of days. She went home this afternoon to make sure she gets to Bridget's middle school basketball game. Bridget had a middle school basketball game this afternoon, and this is against their rival. So Bridget reminded us before we left that it'd be really nice if one of you could be there. So Mary Pat took the flight this afternoon to get home in time for the afternoon game at the Villa Walsh Academy. I have not yet gotten the report on the results. The game started at 5 o'clock this afternoon, so I haven't gotten the report yet on the results. But she sends her greetings to all of you. I've been here more than any other candidate in the race in New Hampshire. I've spent more time here than any other candidate. Mary Pat has been here more days than any other candidate except for me. So the fact is that this family is committed to the First in the Nation primary. I absolutely believe, and I think we're going to prove on February 9th, that what folks from New Hampshire want is a strong message and vision for the future, for cleaning up the mess that the president has given to us by someone who knows how to get the job done and who's willing to stand in front of you and take your questions on any topic and look you in the eye and answer them without regard to whether you're going to agree with my answer or not. I tell folks all the time, if you're looking for the candidate that you agree with 100% of the time, here's my suggestion. Go home and look in the mirror. You're it. You're the only person you agree with 100% of the time. And if that's the standard you hold candidates to, let me tell you what you're going to get. A liar. If you make me believe that the only way I get your vote is to agree with you 100% of the time. You put the temptation in front of the weak to just agree with you and tell you what you want to hear, and then pray to God that you forget that I promised it once I get there. We've had too much of that politics. We need the politics where we tell it like it is. We say what we mean what we say, and we respect each other for our honesty and our candor. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So here's what we'll do. There's only one rule for my town hall meetings in New Hampshire. Just to let you know, in New Jersey, we have 4 rules. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to do a town hall meeting in New Jersey versus a town hall meeting in New Hampshire. I have to have 4 rules in New Jersey. In New Hampshire, I found I only need to have 1. So you can draw whatever conclusion you want to draw from that. I've done 134 town hall meetings in New Jersey as governor. It's one of the things that I enjoy doing the most in my state. It's kept me in touch with the people that I serve. And so here's the one rule. You raise your hand and I call on you. That's it. That's the only rule. I don't respond to yelled out questions. And that's not because I'm a candidate for president or I'm the sitting governor of New Jersey. It's because I'm a father of 4. And now that all 4 of them are home for the holidays, because our 2 oldest are college students and they've come home for the holidays, there's an interesting dynamic going on in our house. The 2 younger ones have taken possession of the house. They think the other ones left. They're like, this is our house now. We set the rules. We do what we need to do. And then the 2 older ones come home. And the 2 older ones think we're the older ones. When we left here, we were in charge. And when we come back, we're still in charge. The 2 younger ones vehemently disagree with this theory. And so there is a lot of yelling right now going on in my house, a lot of disagreement among the children. And so Mary Pat and I right now have a finely tuned ability to ignore things that are yelled at us. He did this, she did that. I want the car, no, I want the car. Mary Pat and I just we look as if we are sedated. We just stare at each other and it's running past us. And so that's why I won't respond to yelled at questions, because right now that sense is really honed in me. So you could yell and I won't hear it. I just consciously won't hear it. So you raise your hand, you ask me questions, and this is not like other town hall meetings in New Hampshire that I've heard about. We have to write down your question before you come in, right? You write it down, you hand it to staff. Staff then reads it, decides which ones the candidate likes to answer, gives the candidate those questions, and then that's what passes for a town hall meeting. We don't do that. Whatever you ask, I answer. Now, it would be inappropriate of me to give the name of the candidate who does town hall meetings like that, so I can't give the person's name, but her initials are Hillary Rodham Clinton. So you raise up your hands. Let me know what you want to ask. I'm happy to take your questions. I'm looking forward to the rest of the evening. Yes, sir, right over here. And they'll bring you a microphone so people can hear you. He's coming up right behind you. Thank you, sir.
What is your feeling about mandatory service in either the military or the civilian public service sector?
I wanted to be.
You wanted to be Mary Pat tonight. Yeah, no, see. After I answer your question, I'll tell that story about what Bradley's talking about. Here's what I'd like to do. I get a lot of questions at town hall meetings here and in Iowa about enormous student debt and what a problem this is becoming for families and for kids who are incurring this debt to get their education. Here's what I'd like to do. I don't want to make national service mandatory, but I want to broaden it. I want to have national service, whether it's military service or other type of national service, available to anyone. And if you're someone who's been educated and has significant student debt, I want you to be able to spend years in national service to work off that debt. It will give us an opportunity to improve lots of different things in our country that needs to be improved. For the young people, it will make them understand that there is something bigger than their own self-interest that they need to contribute to in this country. And it will help them when they leave national service to select a career where they follow their heart, not just their checkbook. I think that most people do better in their careers when they do something that they love, that they feel they're really good at, that's really worthwhile to them. Now, we've all done jobs at times just for the paycheck. I've done them, you've done them, I'm sure. Over time, there have been times when all of us, we have responsibilities. And there are times we have to do things just to make money. But I do think there's something really good and a tradition in this country of people being able to follow their heart and work at something they believe in. Lots of our kids are being denied that opportunity now, not only because of the weak economy that this president has produced, but also because they have so much debt. So they have to go for the highest paycheck they can find to afford to pay back the debt they've incurred. So I'd like to broaden national service significantly. That's a step short of making it mandatory, but I think if you provide that option, a lot of people will take it, because to be able to reduce that debt in that way will be something that's really advantageous to them in the short term and the long term, and it will be good for our country as well. So that's what I'd like to do on national service. Bradley wanted to take my jacket because I tell this story when Mary Pat is here, that one of the early times when we came into New Hampshire, last July or August, we were staying in one of the local hotels in Manchester, and we came downstairs in the morning together, and then Mary Pat, I was standing in the lobby, and she peeled off to go buy a cup of coffee. And so the manager of the hotel came over to me and introduced himself, said, "Governor, really glad to have you staying with us. Hope we're going to see a lot of you in the months to come." And he said, "I just wanted to say hello and welcome you." I said, "Well, thank you, it's very nice." He walked away, and I was continuing to stand there waiting for Mary Pat, and he came back over to me, he goes, "I'd like to tell you something else, if you don't mind." I said, "Sure." He said, "I think it's wonderful." He said, "Did you stand here? You don't just go right to the car, but you stand here and you wait for your young aide to go and get coffee and then to walk her to the car." Now, I know that the way rumors get started in presidential campaigns, so I immediately said, "That is not my young aide. That's my wife. That's my wife. That's Mary Pat. That's my wife." Now, I always tell that story, and the deal I made with her was, whenever she came up here and campaigned, if she came to a town hall meeting, I would tell the story because she loves to be referred to as the young aide. And I tell her that in return, all she has to do is do one thing that a young aide would do, which is when I start the question period, I want to take my jacket off because I have to go to work, and she has to hold my jacket. I can't wait to call her tonight, Jeb. When I tell her Jeb Bradley wanted to be the young aide tonight who was holding my jacket. It's just incredible. I just didn't feel right about it, Jeb. I just didn't. It's not the young part. It was the Jeb Bradley being my aide. I just, the guy's done more in his career than a lot of other people could ever dream of. So you can't be the young aide tonight, Jeb. And I can't do that to Mary Pat either. Other questions? Who's got them? Yes, ma'am.
I have this mic to ask a question, but first, sir, I have a quick suggestion.
Sure.
The people are speaking, and we'd love you to listen.
Oh, so silly.
And that's
So
an oppression, sir. And I
Yeah,
was wondering
I
if you would
understand.
ban fossil fuel extraction.
Yeah, no, I won't. I won't ban fossil fuel extraction because it's stupid to ban fossil fuel extraction. And I have to tell you the truth. I've seen his performance a number of times. A number of times. The performance where you all get up and you yell and all the rest of it. And you're not doing your cause any good. Because the minute you start to act that way, people stop listening. They stop listening. With all due respect, you said you had the microphone to make a suggestion. Well, I'll make a suggestion back to you. You want to be heard on this issue? Stand up and ask a question about whether or not I favor the ending of fossil fuel extraction and what my energy policy is. And then I'll answer your question about that. But when you stand up and you put people in different spots in the room and you put on a show, no one's here to see your show. No one is here to see your show. They're here to have an interaction with a candidate for President of the United States. And so you're young, and this is a new process to you, and I respect that you're here, and I wish that you would have just gotten up and asked the question, and I would have been happy to answer it for you. But I will guarantee you, if you want to put on a show for me, you could be guaranteed of one thing. This ain't my first rodeo, and I'm happy to put on a show for you too, and my show will be a hell of a lot better than yours is. Other questions? Oh, no, Sienna gets to ask me questions all the time. Sienna does not get the question, no. Yes, ma'am, in the back. The microphone's coming to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to ask, I'm somewhat concerned that some of the Republican candidates are cutting at each other. I'd like to see them unite. Is there anything that we can encourage them to do more uniting?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. That's the speech I gave yesterday at St. Anselm's, was that we run the enormous risk of ensuring Hillary Rodham Clinton's election as we continue to cut each other down. And, you know, I got here for my first day of campaigning, or second day of campaigning yesterday in New Hampshire of the new year. And, you know, you now have Senator Rubio throwing 2 different negative ads out there on me. You have Senator Cruz attacking Senator Rubio. You have Senator Rubio also attacking Senator Cruz. You have Governor Kasich attacking me. You have Governor Bush attacking me and Governor Kasich. This is destructive, and it's desperate. And here's the best way you can do it. Show up at one of their town hall meetings and tell them you don't like it, and that you're not going to vote for somebody who's doing that stuff. Because you are right. You have your eye on the ball. It is defeating Hillary Clinton. And the more we minimize ourselves and tear each other down, the less chance we're going to have come the general election to be able to win this election. And, you know, and I find it kind of funny. You know, I was on the stage, it was 2 debates ago, I think, or 3. It's hard to keep track now. But you may remember if you watch the debates, that Governor Bush, on the stage in the debate, began to attack Senator Rubio about his job performance as a senator. And Senator Rubio turned to him and said, rather self-righteously, he said, Jeb, I don't know who it was who convinced you that attacking me would help you, but that's not the way we're going to win. I actually thought it was a really good point. Obviously now, the very same person who was talking to Jeb is talking to Marco. And Marco's listening to that person that he told Jeb not to listen to. It's fascinating. But that's what happens when you're young and you're inexperienced in this business. You forget that what goes around comes around. And so you want to be self-righteous and pontificate to Jeb Bush? Okay. You want to do that in front of 20 million people on national television? Okay. But if you then start throwing stones, people are rightfully going to ask, were you being genuine back then, or was that just a show? And so I think that, you know, all of you have an opportunity to express your concern about this, and not to vote for people who are going to engage in it. And that's the best message. By the way, if you ever want to know the best way to send a politician a message, lose. When you lose, let me tell you, it's a message. It's a message. I've done both. I've won and I've lost. I always learn a lot more when I lose than when I win, because people are willing to tell you why they didn't vote for you. When you win, everybody tells you, oh, brilliant campaign, you were a genius, we knew it from the beginning, you were perfect, you're amazing, it's unbelievable. When you lose, they're all ready to tell you why you lost, and you learn a lot more then. So I think it's something I'm concerned about, but you know, as I said before, I've been through this before. It's inevitable, it comes, and how you react to it shows people how you're going to react under fire as president. And that's what you really need to be concerned about. So Senator Rubio can say whatever he wants about me with all his big money and his television commercials. I'll keep talking about the things that I think matter to the people of New Hampshire and the people of this country, which is keeping this country safe, giving us an economic future that we can believe in, and getting leadership once again in the White House that gives America a place in the world that we can be proud of, not where we're reacting to every crisis and every tin pot dictator that's running around the world right now. That's what we need to do. Yes, sir. I'll give you mine.
Thank you, Governor. It's probably pretty safe to say that about everybody here tonight wants to win. And we all like to be winners. I'm undecided. I'm looking for the candidate that I think has the best chance of winning, and I'm having a hard time reaching that conclusion so far. So while it is time to buy, I'm still somewhat undecided. I'm not looking to vote for a clown prince-in-chief. I'm not looking to vote for somebody who blows a lot of steam, but it might make me feel good, but has no chance of winning. What I am looking for is somebody who shares the same values that I do. I'd like to ask you, number one, why do you want to be president? And then number two, how are you going to win the GOP nomination? Because I'm sure you've heard the concern of a lot of folks that said that you're not conservative enough to win nationally and get to the point where you're going to go up against Hillary. I think you'd be a great candidate against Hillary, but you got to get there first.
First of all, the most important question is, why do I want to be president? And I want to be president because I love this country, and I am really, really fearful for what country I'm going to be leaving my children and my grandchildren. And I think if you believe you have the ability and the experience and the will to make a difference, then I think you have to. I don't think it's optional. I've said this about American leadership around the world, too. It is both a burden and an opportunity, but it is not an option. American leadership is not an option. Well, if I feel that way about American leadership around the world, I better think of that same way about American leadership within this country. Running for president is both a burden and an opportunity. But for me, once I decided that I felt like I had something to say of value and that I had the experience and the will to try to get it done, then it's no longer an option. I think you have an obligation as an American to offer yourself for service. And that's what I'm doing. And that's why I'm doing it. The last piece is because I think I'm ready. 4 years ago, a lot of people wanted me to run for president. I heard from lots of people all over the country, really, really prominent governmental people and regular folks who sent me letters. I said I wouldn't run for president, and I only gave one reason why I wouldn't, and it was because I said, in my heart, I know I'm not ready. The only thing worse than running for president and losing is running for president and winning when you're not ready. And we've now seen that for the last 7 years. The man in the White House right now, he saw a political opportunity, and he read it correctly. I have to give him credit. He saw his particular skill set, and he said, I'm the right guy for this moment. I can win. The shame of Barack Obama is he never asked himself, I suspect, am I ready to be president? He just said, I'm ready to win and can win. But he didn't ask if he's ready to be president. 4 years ago, I asked myself, I saw the opportunity. It was clear as day to me that I could win. But I asked myself, am I ready? And I wasn't. I'd been governor for 18 months. I wasn't ready to be president of the United States. And so I offer myself this time as well because I believe in my heart I'm ready. I'm ready to serve you well, not just serve you, but serve you well. How do I win? First off, this idea that I'm not conservative enough is a part of like the pundit class. And I think that's based on some stereotypes that we need to explode. The first one is that I'm a Republican from the Northeast. So you can't possibly be conservative, right? Well, man, you're from the Northeast. You think you're conservative? That's the way it starts. You're from the Northeast, so you can't possibly really be a conservative. If you're someone who is somewhat ethnic from the Northeast, then there's even less of a chance you can be conservative, right? So all of a sudden, you're this guy with a Sicilian heritage, and they say, he can't possibly be conservative, right? There's no way. He's an Italian from the Northeast. He can't possibly be conservative. And then they say, lastly, they get even more micro. They go, when he's from New Jersey. So how could you possibly be conservative from New Jersey? We exist. So let's look at the record, which is what we'll be talking about now, at least in part, over the course of the next number of months. Americans for Tax Reform put out about 2 months ago this statistic, that I have vetoed more tax increases than any governor in American history. That's a pretty conservative thing to have as part of your resume. Second, that we have reduced spending over $2.5 billion in discretionary spending from where it was 8 years ago. Not we slowed the growth, we reduced spending. We have today 10,000 fewer employees in the state's employ than we did on the day I became governor 6 years ago. That's pretty conservative. We've capped property taxes in our state Property taxes, which you know full well about up here in New Hampshire, had gone up 70% in the 10 years before I became governor. In the 6 years that I've been governor, property taxes have gone up 14%. We have slowed down the rate of growth of property taxes threefold, just nearly threefold. Next, we reformed teacher tenure so that now a teacher in New Jersey who's tenured, if they get a failing evaluation for 1 year or a below average evaluation for 2 years in a row, they can lose their job. That's conservative, making people accountable for the results they produce in their job. We passed pension and benefit reform in New Jersey that will save the taxpayers $130 billion over the next 30 years, and we did so with a Democratic legislature. That's pretty conservative. I'm the first pro-life governor in New Jersey's history, even though they told me when I ran in 2009, you can't be pro-life and win. No one's ever won as a pro-life Republican in New Jersey. I've won twice as a pro-life Republican in New Jersey. That's pretty conservative. As governor, I've vetoed the .50 caliber rifle ban. I've vetoed a reduction in magazine capacity. I vetoed a statewide firearms ID card. And I've pardoned half a dozen people who were legal owners of handguns outside of our state who got pulled over while traveling through our state. And because they possessed the gun that they can legally possess in their own state, they were facing jail time in my state. That's unfair and unconstitutional, and I used my pardon authority to pardon them. That's pretty conservative. So, let's get away from the assumptions that go with what state you live in, what region you live in, where your family comes from, and let's look at a person's record. And when people have the full opportunity to examine my record, fair-minded people can agree or disagree with what I've done, but they cannot conclude that I'm not a conservative. We've cut taxes in our state for businesses by over $2.5 billion. In the 8 years before I became governor, we had zero net private sector job growth. Zero. In 8 years under 2 Democratic governors. In the 6 years I've been governor, we have 225,000 new private sector jobs. And last year, 2015, without the December numbers, New Jersey had its best year of private sector job growth that it's had in 15 years. Better than the last 5 governors. Getting private sector job growth is conservative because it puts your faith in the private sector, not in growing government jobs, which have decreased in my governorship, not only at the state government, but at every level of government. That's conservative. So, to me, I think that's the way you combat it. You combat it calmly and coolly, but directly with the facts. And how will I, after I win, you didn't ask this, but I'm going to answer it anyway. After I win the Republican nomination, which I will, then how do I beat Hillary Clinton? The exact same way. We will beat her with the facts. And what you should be asking yourself, in addition to my philosophy and whether or not we share values, you should also, in my opinion, be asking yourself, who is the best person to be standing on that stage to prosecute the case against Hillary Clinton and her vision for America's future? Because then it'll be a binary choice. It'll be me or her. If I'm the person who's up there, I can guarantee you, she will not get away with a thing. And secondly, she won't get within 10 miles of the White House. We will beat her. That's why I should get your support.
Thank you, Governor. I'm well aware, and I'm positive, that you're a staunch supporter of our military. And as Commander-in-Chief, sir, what do you feel you could do to make sure that the force is well-equipped, well-maintained, and ready for any contingency that may face us?
Thank you, sir. It's a very good question. I would say this. First off, we have to rebuild our military. And I'm going to tell you to what levels, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to pay for it. But there's no question in my mind that this military is right now underfunded significantly. Why? Right now we have the smallest active duty army that we've had since 1940. We are a World War II levels on active duty soldiers in the Army. We have the smallest Navy that we have had in this country since World War I. We are now at a 260 ship Navy, the smallest we've had since World War I. This president wants us to cut by 50% the United States Air Force. If we know these numbers, everyone around the world knows these numbers because we're an open society. And the fact is that that is one of the reasons that we're being pushed around right now. That's why Russia is in Crimea and Ukraine, why they're partnering with Iran in Syria, why you're seeing ISIS and Al-Qaeda getting more aggressive against us. They know our military is spread too thin and that we don't have enough to do the jobs that need to be done. So I've laid out, I did this in a speech in May in Portsmouth. I've laid out, and it's on my website if you want to go and look at it in detail. I've said we have to get to no fewer than 500,000 active duty soldiers from 440,000, which is where we are right now in the United States Army. We need to get to a 350 ship Navy, and we have to modernize the Ohio class of submarines to make sure that that leg of the nuclear triad is the most secure and the most safe. Third, we should be at no fewer than 2,600 coded aircraft ready to go in the United States Air Force, and we should be at no fewer than 185,000 active duty Marines in the Marine Corps. Now, how do we get there? The way we get there is we have to reform entitlements in this country. What's the connection? The connection is that we spend 71 cents of every dollar in this year's federal budget on entitlements and debt service. 71 cents of every dollar are on entitlements and debt service. They used to ask Willie Sutton, why did he rob banks? And he said, because it's where the money is. We want to rebuild our military in this country. We have to reorder our priorities. And Jeb mentioned this off the top. I am the only candidate still who has put forward a detailed entitlement reform program, which, scored by the Congressional Budget Office, will save over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. We need to do that to be able to invest in our military, and I would suggest to you as well, invest in the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation, which this president has cut, in order to come up with the next round of cutting-edge treatments and cures for the real diseases in this country that are causing great heartbreak in families and costing us a fortune at the end of life. Money that we should not be spending. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and Alzheimer's. Those 4 diseases are breaking families, both emotionally and financially, and they're breaking the bank with us in Medicare and Medicaid because we're not finding the cutting-edge treatments and cures earlier. It is costing enormous amounts of money for families and for the government for end-of-life treatment in those 4 diseases. If we took some of that money and partnered with the private sector to come up with new treatments and new cures for those 4 diseases, and we made great progress in those 4 diseases, it would not only improve quality of life in this country, but it would also cost us less money at the back end, where all we're doing then is maintaining a lower quality of life for those people. It's the right thing to do, it's the humane thing to do, but it's not the best thing to do for our country. Why is it that this president, who's run up more debt than all of his predecessors combined, think about that. Barack Obama has run up more debt than every president from George Washington to George W. Bush combined. How is it that this year he only increased the budget for the National Institutes of Health by 0.1% and cut the budget for the National Science Foundation by 4.3%? And this was not the Republican Congress. This was the budget as submitted by the President of the United States. So we have to reform entitlements to fund our military, and those are the levels I would fund them at. And then we need to go after these diseases with the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation. That's not only good for those reasons I gave, but here's the last reason. America has to remain the cutting-edge leader in technology in this world. And health technology has always been one of the ways we've been further ahead. And if we don't invest the money, we will not get there. And we cannot borrow any more money. We are nearly $19 trillion in debt. And so whether it's for military or whether it's for these things that we do to try to cure and treat diseases, we need to make priority judgments. That's what an executive does. You look at the pot of money you have and you say to yourself, how am I going to divide this money up in a way that gives the best results for the people who are paying the money? And that's what a governor does all the time. And that's why another reason why we need a governor as the president. Because let me tell you something, these guys in the United States Senate don't have the first idea about that. Not the first idea. There's not a program they never saw that they didn't like. All right? And let's face it, everybody, the United States Senate is like school. It really is. You're saying, what's he mean? I'll explain it to you. They tell you where to show up, what time to show up. They tell you what chair to sit in. They tell you what you're going to do that day, what your assignment is. And then all you have to do is say yes or no. It's like school, except maybe even easier. That's not what trains you to become president of the United States. I don't know what's going to happen to me every day as governor. I don't have the first idea. I don't get told where to go and what time and what chair to sit in. I don't have any of that. Every day, something's going to happen. And you got to be ready to deal with it. And there's not another 99 people to help you decide. You have to decide. I can remember when we had Hurricane Sandy, and I got the first briefing the morning after Hurricane Sandy, and they told me 365,000 homes are destroyed, 75% of the state's without power. There are no operational water treatment or wastewater treatment plants. Every school in the state is closed. Every major state highway is obstructed. And there are only 51 operational gas stations in a state of 8.9 million people. And then after they tell you all that, do you know what happens when you're governor? They're sitting around this table, and they all shut up, and they just stare at you. And they say, okay, sir, now what are we going to do? I guarantee you that never happens in the United States Senate. Ever. Ever. If something like that were to happen, they'd all run out of the room and say, whoever the last one that's left there, you're stuck. It's like when you go to dinner, and all of a sudden, like you're with 5 other guys at dinner, and then they all get up, excuse themselves to go to the men's room, right? The check comes, and they never come back. That's what it's like being governor, man. The check gets delivered to your table. You don't have the option to go, no, thank you. You're the one. And so that's what we need to do in this country for our military. They need to know that the person who's sitting in that chair as the commander-in-chief is unafraid to make decisions. We'll set a mission for them and then let them execute the mission. Not run wars out of the White House, but let our military men and women who are trained to do it meet the mission. That's what you learn as a governor. That's something you can never learn as a United States Senator, and that's why we need to do that, and that's what I'll do to rebuild our military.
Thank you, Governor. I want to follow up on a question that was started earlier, because I am interested in hearing more about your energy policy and how it would impact the environment. The environment is very important to us here in New Hampshire.
Sure. I think it's important to everybody across this country. Let me tell you what we've done in New Jersey and then how that would affect what my approach would be as president. First, in New Jersey, we were part of something you're still a part of called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. It is essentially a cap-and-trade program for the northeastern states. Pennsylvania was never a part of it. All of the other states were. When I came into office, I pulled this out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And the reason I did was that all it was a tax that increased energy bills in my state for folks who already couldn't afford what they had to pay. And all it was giving a slush fund to government to spend on programs they wanted to spend it on. I didn't think that was necessary. But then we went about doing what we needed to do to bring and make energy affordable in our state and to help our environment. 53% of New Jersey's electricity is generated by nuclear power. 53%. In the most densely populated state in America. For 4 decades, we have operated safely nuclear power plants, and a number of them in our state with multiple reactors. And it's allowed us to generate 53% of the electricity for a state of 8.9 million people without adding to our carbon footprint in any way with nuclear power. I think we need to start looking at nuclear power much more closely again. 3 Mile Island was 36, 37 years ago. The technology is significantly better. It's time for us to get over it and to start looking at that as an option. Secondly, if you leave here tonight and you stop at a restaurant, and let's say you're standing at the bar waiting for your table, here's a way I'm going to get you a free drink. You ask the person next to you, who are the 3 top solar energy producing states in America? The first 2 are easy. Everyone will get it. Arizona, California. Even if you don't know, you could guess, right? Someone would guess Arizona, California, or Florida, right? Lots of sunshine, lots of open space. It could work. Arizona, California, 1 and 2. Number 3 is where you win your drink. It's New Jersey. New Jersey is the 3rd largest solar energy producing state in the country. No one would guess that. But here's why. Because we're such a small state and a densely populated state, solar energy is perfect for us. You could put solar arrays anywhere, on the roofs of shopping malls, on the roofs of manufacturing plants, on the roofs of parking garages, on the roofs of homes. And if you travel around New Jersey, you'll see them in all those places and more. How does it happen? Because government partnered with the private sector to make it affordable for people and to allow people to sell their energy. And so it's given them an incentive and made it financially affordable for them to use solar power. Now, not nearly everybody uses solar power in New Jersey, but enough people are that we're now the 3rd largest producers in the country. We have Marcellus Shale right next to our state in Pennsylvania. We have built pipelines, and we're in the process now of building 3 more natural gas-fired energy plants in our state. It's a cleaner burning energy than coal, and it helps to lower what you're putting into the environment as well. And because it's near us and affordable, our energy bills in the last 18 months in New Jersey have gone down 9%. Imagine if here in New Hampshire, you actually could have your energy bills go down. In New Jersey, our energy bills have gone down 9%. Last piece is this. All those things were decided based upon affordability and common sense. So what's it led to from an environmental perspective? By 2014, we have already met our clean air goals in New Jersey for 2020. Nuclear, solar, natural gas, minimal use of coal in our state, and we've been able to lower and get our clean air goals for 2020 by 2014. No government mandate, no in-new tax, no cap and trade, none of this stuff. Fact is that we're doing it the right way, because if you give people the right incentives to do this, they want to do it. For the very reason you said in your question, because people care about the environment. They want clean water to drink, they want clean air to breathe. And they know that it's essential to human life. So people are not going to not do it if they can have an affordable way to do it. And I look at Iowa. I've been driving around Iowa a lot lately. I mean, there are wind turbines everywhere. Right? I mean, it's a flat state with lots of land. So, I mean, you drive down some of the highways in Iowa, I mean, there are wind turbines for as far as the eye can see. They're really making wind energy work in Iowa. Well, good for them. That's what they should do. We tried to put wind turbines on land in New Jersey. We wouldn't only have dead birds, we'd have dead people. I can guarantee you, just from the noise alone, people would go wild and kill each other, right? We can't, and we're a very tense state. We can't have that, right? So my point to you is I would pursue the same policy as president. I would encourage each state to have a plan that helps to reach these goals, to have a plan that's affordable for the citizens of their state. Because I believe in the goodness of the American people. And I believe if we give them affordable alternatives, they'll exercise using those alternatives. But if what we do is put more government mandates on this and tell them this is what you must do, there's no one size fits all in this country. If they mandated wind energy for the entire country, New Jersey we could not do it. It's just physically impossible for us to do it. So we can't have this one size fits all from the federal government, but we need to set goals, and we need to make sure that we give everyone the opportunity to reach those goals. So that's the way I would approach it, and it's worked in our state, and it's worked in our state to be able to reach those clean air goals 6 years ahead of time. And we're proud of that record, and I'm proud of that record. It's a good environmental record, but it's also a good competitive energy record as well. because it uses the whole portfolio. Everything that makes economic sense for us to use, we're using. We use oil, obviously refined in gasoline. We use coal where necessary. We use a lot of natural gas. We use a lot of nuclear, over 50%, 53% is nuclear, and we're the third largest solar producers. That's a common sense approach to doing this the right way, without the heavy hand of government on every little decision, but with a guiding hand of government to say, find out what's affordable for you and then make it work. In Iowa, it's renewable fuels and wind power. In New Jersey, it's nuclear power and solar energy. We can make this work. We can make it work without having to impose things on each other. And that's the way I would approach it as president. So thanks for the question. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor. I'm a proud manufacturer employer here in the city of Rochester. And American-made products, distribute products all over New England. How would you improve and encourage American-made products? Thank you.
I think there's two things we need to do in the main for manufacturers, and you as a manufacturer, I think, understand this already without me telling you. First thing is that we know that the main driver costs for manufacturers in this country are twofold, right? It's labor costs and energy costs are the two main drivers of cost. And now we're not going to be able to compete with China on labor costs, nor would we want to. It doesn't make sense. That's not the quality and standard of life we want to have for our folks. But if we get a smart energy policy, we can compete on energy costs and beat them on it. How do we do it? We have to partner with our neighbors in Canada and Mexico. This is why the president's decision on the Keystone Pipeline was so wrong-headed. So wrong-headed. First of all, it makes no sense from an economic perspective. But secondly, his own State Department said that there was not an environmental impact. Third, that's not what you do to a friend. Canada has sent troops at our request to Iraq and Afghanistan only because the American president asked them to. They asked to build a pipeline where they're going to send oil to us, where 85% of that oil is going to be used by America, and 100% of it's going to be refined by American refineries. And we said, no, thank you. I mean, how that makes any sense, I have absolutely no idea. And he can't explain it. He can't explain it factually because he gave in to his big donors. That's what he did. Tom Steyer and his environmental radicalism and all the tens of millions of dollars he's given to Barack Obama's causes bought him a policy. Mexico is now in the midst of privatizing their energy industry. It used to be government-owned. They're now going to privatize it and allow outside investment, private investment from the United States and other places to help modernize their equipment, to make extraction of oil and natural gas easier, more effective, and safer for them. North America could become the energy continent of the world with what we're doing in the United States and Canada and Mexico. And if we do that, your access to that energy will be increased geometrically and your price will be lowered. We need to do that for manufacturers in this country because if we can compete and win on energy costs, you can compete and win in trade any place around the world, not just inside America, but all over the world. Second thing is, the president's own Small Business Administration says, and here's another thing I'm sure you know, that the average cost of complying with federal regulation for a small business in this country is $10,000 per employee. $10,000 per employee for the average small business. But wait, for a manufacturer, the average cost to comply with federal regulation is $34,000 per employee. And you know it as a manufacturer, whether it's OSHA or whether it's the EPA, and we could go through the whole list of the alphabet soup, right? That you have to hire people to just comply with the regulations so you avoid the fines and the hassle and the potential shutdown of your business. We need to lift the regulatory burden off of manufacturers in this country. This president in 2014 issued 81,000 pages of new federal regulation in 1 year. It's a record for any administration in the history of the government. 81,000 pages. Forget about who reads that. Who writes it? 81,000, that's a lot of work. 81,000 pages of new federal regulation? We need to stop. That's why my first executive order as president will be The same as my first executive order as governor of New Jersey. I froze any new regulation from any department or agency for 90 days. As president, I'd do it for 180. And I would send the vice president out, as I sent the lieutenant governor out, with members of the legislature and here with members of Congress, to travel around this country and to listen to folks like you. Come with your list of the most ridiculous, onerous, non-productive regulations you have to comply with and bring it to us. Now, I did this in New Jersey, and at the end of my first year as governor, we got rid of 1/3 of all the regulations that were put in place by my predecessor. 1/3. And you know where I got the ideas from? Guys like you. The lieutenant governor traveled around the state, she took in all this input, and that's where we got the ideas from. And then we executed on it. That's something a president can do without the Congress. The regulatory scheme is developed by the executive branch. We can cut it back. And can you imagine? Let's just say we cut it by 1/3 in terms of your cost to comply with regulation. And you went from $34,000 an employee to $24,000, $22,000 per employee. All that money would be there for you, for your profit, for you then to decide how to reinvest. New plant, new equipment, more employees, greater distribution chains, new agreements with folks. Be your call, your business. But you'd have the capital without having to borrow it to be able to do that. Those, I think, are the two major ways you get at trying to help manufacturers in this country create more jobs and more economic activity. If we put it in your hands, you can do it. We got to stop putting this wet blanket over you that we're doing with regulation, and we've got to free you up to be able to do it from the perspective of making sure that you have an energy cost that can make you competitive with the rest of the world without hurting the salaries that you pay your employees, because we don't want to lower the quality of life in this country, we want to raise it. So that's the way I would deal with it. Thanks for raising the question. All right. My staff is telling me that I can take one more question, which means I'm going to take two. And here's why. I want them to know I'm still the boss. And you laugh about this, but you know what it's like to run for president of the United States? Here's what it's like. You're surrounded every day by people younger than you who tell you where to go and what to do every minute. Every minute. I am a captive to the tyranny of the young. And the only place where I'm free from that tyranny is right here in the center of this room. When I have this microphone and I say, no, I'm not taking one, I'm taking two. That's the way it goes. You just have to stay with me longer. So we'll take two more questions from folks. Let's take from this lady right here. Yes, ma'am. And he's got a microphone for you.
I'm fairly conservative, but I struggle with that in a few issues, and one of them is gun control. Where are you with gun control?
Yeah.
I don't want my daughter or anyone else out there when things bad are happening.
I don't want them out there either when bad things are happening, and I've got 4 children. How old are you? 13. So I've got a 12-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son, so they surround you. And I have a 22-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter who are away from home. Yeah. Yeah, I've thought that often during the holidays. Here's the thing. One of the things I learned as a prosecutor was that we're spending much too much time focusing on gun laws for law-abiding people and much too little time on how we control gun violence from criminals. That most of the gun violence that occurs in this country come from people who are hardened, multiply offending criminals. And we're not doing enough to stop them. We have the laws on the books to stop them. So one of the things that, when we were in the Bush administration, that Attorney General Ashcroft demanded of all of us was that we increase geometrically our gun prosecutions. That there are laws on the books that have been put there to stop people who are felons from possessing handguns, and that if they just possess them, forget commit a crime with them, but just possess them when you're a convicted felon, that's a minimum of 5 years in prison with no parole. First offense, second offense, 10 years in prison, no parole. When you go after folks federally for those gun crimes, you break them because they don't, if you go in the state system, it's less time and parole's available. In the federal system, it's not. So we increased our prosecution of gun crimes significantly in New Jersey and around the country during those years, and we saw crime lowered and violence lowered. And so the first thing is to focus on what the real problem is, because I can guarantee you something. All the presidents talk today of background checks, enhanced background checks. No criminal I've ever met goes back through a background check. They don't go through a 48-hour waiting period, okay? They don't do those things. And so let's not kid ourselves that in the main, the violence that we're concerned about is going to be prevented by more of those measures. Now, here's the more difficult part. The more difficult part is these mass shootings that happen, right? Whether you're talking about Aurora, Colorado, or Sandy Hook, Connecticut, whether you're talking about Virginia Tech campus, or any of the other mass shootings that we have seen over the course of time. That becomes a lot harder. And my answer to that is that we have to do more on mental health in this country. Each and every time that we've had one of these shootings, it is by almost exclusively a deeply mentally disturbed young man who his family and or friends knew was disturbed and did not act. Or they had acted at one point, the person was treated and medicated, and then the person became non-compliant with their medication and didn't want to take it anymore. And it led them off in a very bad way. In New Jersey, the things that I proposed is to make it easier for doctors and for families to involuntarily commit people who have a history of mental illness and who are speaking out violently. The rules are so unclear now that doctors are afraid to do it. They're afraid they're going to get sued. Families are afraid to do it. So one, we need to give them the tools to be able to do that. And that not only protects us from those people, but you know that most of those shootings end up with the shooter committing suicide. We need to protect those people from themselves too. Secondly, we need to start talking about mental illness in this country in a different way. And I think mental illness and drug addiction are in the same pot. We stigmatize this stuff. We think that it reflects upon us. So for instance, you know, my mom was a cancer victim. My mom smoked for 55 years, and she died of lung cancer. When my mom got diagnosed with lung cancer, none of us were ashamed to tell anybody about that. We didn't think it reflected upon us. My mother was an addict. She was addicted to cigarettes. She tried everything she could to quit, gum and patches. And I mean, I remember when she got hypnosis. It was great for us because it mellowed her out a little bit, you know? Kind of rounded the edges off a little bit, but it didn't work for the smoking, so she stopped, you know? So vacation was over. But she tried. She couldn't stop. And no one said to us then, well, your mom's getting what she deserves. Everyone said she got a disease. And no matter how she got it, we want her treated and we want to try to make her better. We couldn't. She passed. But I had no hesitation to tell people that my mom had lung cancer. If my mom had mental illness, would I have been as open? I think not, because we think somehow that reflects upon us. We think somehow if someone in our circle, our family, has a mental problem, has mental illness, we think that somehow that reflects badly upon us. So we don't talk about it. There's a certain amount of stigma and shame that goes along with it. And when that happens, when there's stigma and shame that goes along with it, we hide it. And when we hide it, we don't treat it. And when we don't treat it, we're playing Russian roulette. And so the president needs to start talking about the treatment of mental illness in a way that lifts the stigma the same way we should lift stigma from drug addiction, because that's a disease too. My mother's drug of choice was nicotine. And we didn't hesitate to talk about that. But somehow if it's heroin or cocaine, we say, that reflects on us. It means I was a bad parent. I failed as a parent. I failed as a spouse. I failed as a brother or sister because I allowed this to happen to my sibling, my spouse, my child. It's a disease. And so the harder part of the gun issue is we need to aggressively deal with mental health. And we've got to get real about that. We're going to have to invest money in it. We're going to have to get smarter about it. Because if we don't, we're going to have more tragedies like this. But it is not going to help. The stuff the president proposed today, not only doesn't he have the legal authority to do it, but it's not going to make a difference. And I just think this is a liberal agenda on his part that makes no sense. And the last thing I'd say about this too is we better be careful about the Constitution. All right, now, the First Amendment's about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and the prevention of establishment of religion. I think we'd all say those are pretty important things in the way our country is run. And I think that's why the founders made it the First Amendment. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. I don't think they picked it out of a hat. Like, I don't think they went, okay, let's see, what order are we going to put these? I don't know the heck with it. Let's just put these in there and pick them out of a hat and see where. I think they put them in an order that they thought was important. I think what motivated them on the Second Amendment was the idea that they were afraid of government getting big and too intrusive and not listening to the people. And they wanted the people to have the right to bear arms in case they had to protect the rights and freedoms that were given to them in that Constitution from their government. That's a pretty important thing, right? So, the Constitution isn't a perfect document. It's only the best document of its kind ever written. But it's not perfect. But man, we better protect it. Because people are dying all over the world trying to get a piece of what we have. Just a piece of what we have. And so that's the way I would deal with it. I fear for my children too. I really do. And I think, gosh, it's so much more dangerous a world than it was when I was growing up. I think about the stuff my parents used to let me do. And man, I wouldn't even think about letting my kids do that. I remember inadvertently telling a story one day where my mother let me and my brother, when I was 15 and he was 13, so this is 1977, she let us go to a concert, a rock concert at Madison Square Garden in New York. And by ourselves. And we took the bus. The bus was like 3 blocks from our house. We got on the bus. The bus took us to the Port Authority Terminal at 8th Avenue and 41st Street in 1977 in New York City. And then we walked the 8 blocks from the Port Authority bus terminal to Madison Square Garden. Went into the rock concert, got out at like 10:30, walked back at 10:30 at night to the Port Authority bus terminal, got on the bus in the bus terminal, and took it back home. There's no chance I'd let my kids do that. Not a chance. It's not a reflection only on differing judgments and mores as we evolve as a society. It's a reflection on how much more dangerous the society is. And that's about crime. It's not about mental illness. That's about crime. And you see what's happening in New York City. It's a cautionary tale. When Rudy Giuliani became mayor in 1993, he was elected in 93, became mayor in January of 94. In 1993, there were 2,200 murders in New York City. 2,200 murders in 1 year. Rudy Giuliani just put into effect aggressive policing, backed the police force. For 8 years, Michael Bloomberg did the same thing for the next 12 years. And when Michael Bloomberg left office, there were 200 murders in his last year as mayor. 200 from 2,200. What's happening now with Bill de Blasio, who doesn't back the police force and stop and frisk, putting liberal policies on crime into place? The murder rate in New York City is up 11%. When we're worried about our kids, let's worry about that first. Let's worry about that first. And I think if we start to address that and we address the mental health issues, we're going to have a pathway to a safer society, and not making big headlines about it, but making slow, steady progress like they made in New York City over 20 years, from 2,200 murders to 200 murders. And anybody who lived in or near New York City will tell you that it felt safer. Not only was safer, it felt safer. And anybody who goes into New York City today will tell you it feels less safe. And you know, you got Commissioner Bratton and Mayor de Blasio traipsing out all different variations on the statistics to try to convince you that it's just as safe in New York City today as it was when Rudy Giuliani and Mike Bloomberg were mayor. Baloney. It's not. And as you walk around that city, you feel it. You feel it. Human beings sense danger. We feel what brings on fear. So he can tell me as many statistics as he wants. We know what's going on there. That's what we need to do to keep your daughter safe and mine too. Thanks for raising it. It's an important issue. Yes, ma'am, in the back right there. You'll be our last one. Hold on, let me get the microphone so everybody can hear you.
I spent several hours today working on my federal tax return.
My condolences.
And I have felt for many years something that everyone, almost everyone in this country has to do should probably be made a little simpler. Well, I wondered, what are your feelings on the present tax code?
It stinks and it's rigged for the rich. Okay? It's rigged for the rich. And so I would make it a lot simpler, and you see my plan on our website, and I'll go through it with you real quickly now. What I would do is get rid of every one of the special interest loopholes and all the deductions except for two: the home mortgage interest deduction and the charitable contribution deduction. And the reason I do that is twofold. One is because they're the ones that regular people use. And secondly, that's encouraging something we should continue to encourage in this country: home ownership, which is good for the economy, it's good for families, and charitable contributions, because government should not have to do all this. And we have great charities around this country that do great work for people in need every day, and you should have the right to choose which ones you want to support with your money, and we should encourage you to do that by giving you a tax deduction. But that's it. Now, New Hampshire, you know, New Jersey, we pay taxes that we get to deduct now. I won't do it. We got to impose discipline on these states. If you get to deduct all your taxes that you pay at the state and local level, well, then heck, there's no incentive for them to lower them, because they're saying to you, well, you get to deduct it on your federal, it all washes out in the end. You've heard all the arguments, right? So get rid of all that stuff. And here's how you would do your taxes. Your taxes, you said you started working today, right? In a Christie administration, you would be done already, because here's all you'd have to do. Here's how much you made. Here's how much you paid in mortgage interest, deduct that. Here's how much you donated to charity, deduct that. Get the number, multiply it times your bracket, send your check, and be done. That's it. You do it in 15 minutes. Once you have the information from you, you do it in 15 minutes. You don't need an accountant. Now, my father hates this part of the speech, because my father's a CPA. And he says to me, I raised you. I paid for your college doing this stuff. What are you doing to me? I'm like, Dad, you're 82, you're retired. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And I think that's the way we need to do it. And plus, if we got rid of all this, we'd be able to lower the rates. So the highest rate would be 28%, which is where it was when Ronald Reagan did tax reform in 1986 during the period of greatest economic growth we've seen in this country. The lowest rate would be 8%. So you could do that and do it with 3 brackets, and then I'd negotiate the one in between 8 and 28 with Congress. We'd come to an agreement on it. 3 brackets, 2 deductions. You could do it on 1 sheet of paper. Sign it, send your check, and be done. Imagine how many IRS agents we could fire. It would be fabulous, just as an aside, right? And imagine how much economic activity it would spur, with more money in your pocket and with the government telling you less and less how you're supposed to spend your money to save taxes. Think about how much activity goes on in this country that's useless, a wasting, spinning of time, just so that you have the tax deduction. We don't need to do that. Let you decide how to spend your money. More of it. Yeah, we got to pay taxes. It stinks, but we have to. We have a government. We have a nation to secure. We have a homeland to secure. You know, we have education to pay for. We have to do these things. So you're going to have to pay taxes. But it should not be the way it is now. It shouldn't be that you have spent hours today and you're just starting. And, you know, when you started to say it, I could see that look in your eyes. You're like, oh, it's not done yet. You know, and it's not the way it should be. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's that way because rich people, in the main, have gotten lawyers and lobbyists to go down to Washington, D.C., and to get little things put in there. And all those little things start to add up. And after a while, we're paying for stuff we don't even know we're paying for. And we're doing things that we don't even agree with doing. Because we just lose track of it because it's too many pages. It's too big. So that's what I would do. And I think, you know, from our perspective, and the way it's been scored, it would be revenue neutral. So we're not talking about losing money from the Treasury. And in fact, we'd probably get more money in because people would be more honest. Let's not forget, you know, every once in a while, people aren't exactly completely honest with the IRS, right? People find ways around the system every once in a while. Cash exchanges, hey, nobody knows about. We'd have a more honest system, too, if people thought it was a fair system to them. They'd be willing to pay their fair share if they thought everybody else is paying theirs. And think about the wealthy people in this country. They'd pay more. Because right now they get their rate reduced over and over again by all the deductions. If all they can do is deduct their home mortgage interest and their charitable contributions, well, if they want to keep lowering that rate, that means they give a lot to charity. That's good for America. They want to give a lot to charity. That's good for America. But they won't have all the other little special things that go in there that help them to lower that rate lower and lower and lower. And if you felt like everyone was paying their fair share, you're more positive about paying yours. But right now, most people think that this thing is rigged for the rich, and the reason they feel that way is because it is. And we need to be honest about that and just say it. And then you got to have the courage to go and fix it. But it shouldn't be that courageous, because you know what? There's more of us than there are of them. So we should just band together and get it done the right way. So thanks for bringing it up, and good luck with the rest of it. All right. Allow me to say two things to you before we go back out. The first is to say thank you. What I said at the top, I really mean. I mean, you know, people who are cynical and skeptical about our democracy, and they have every right to be at times, given especially what goes on in Washington, D.C. I tell them when I go back to New Jersey and they ask me, you know, what it's like to campaign for president in New Hampshire. I tell them to come here because you'll become less cynical about our democracy. That in 9-degree weather tonight, 225 people came out to listen to a guy who's running for president, to ask him questions, and to listen, to help to make your decision about who you're going to support 5 weeks from today. And gosh, that's inspiring. It's really inspiring. And anybody who gets up here and gets the chance to do this, whether you just observe it or whether you participate in it as a candidate, it's a really inspiring thing. So thank you for continuing to restore our faith in our democratic system. It's really, really wonderful. And to be a participant in it is a real honor. So thank you for coming and listening to me. Second thing I want to say to you is this. You know, all the different things we talked about tonight, you can go on the website, you can see all the detailed proposals we've put forward. They're there. I want you to go and look at them and read them. I think it's important for you to do that. And I'm glad you're here to ask me questions about the things that concern you. But let's be honest. When President George W. Bush, then Governor Bush, was here in 1999 and 2000 running for president, he did town hall meetings like this, I'm sure that no one asked him this question. No one said to him, Governor, what would you do as president if 19 radical Islamic jihadist terrorists hijacked 4 American commercial airliners, flew 2 of them into the World Trade Center, 1 of them into the Pentagon, and was aiming one of them for the White House or the Capitol, but they got crashed into the ground in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and 3,000 people were killed? What would you do? Now, no one asked him that because no one could possibly have imagined that. No one could have imagined that that could have happened, yet it did. And so he was president when it happened. How do you know if the person standing in front of you can actually handle that? See, because no matter what we do, no matter how many questions we ask, there are going to be things that are going to happen when I'm president that you're not going to anticipate, and neither am I. We couldn't possibly. It's the nature of the human spirit that things happen that we could never have anticipated, and people do things that we never could have thought would happen. Why did I feel confident that day that George W. Bush would be able to handle this for our country and return us to a place of safety and security? Because I felt like during the campaign I'd gotten to know him. I felt like he's got the spirit, the heart, and the strength to deal with this. So I think in addition to finding out what my positions are and issues, you need to know who I am. So I'm going to end tonight by telling you who I am, because you have a right to know. I am the son of an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. Now, for any of you who had experience with this, the best way for me to describe it to you is that I was the oldest in that family. I am the oldest in that family. And I became expert at a young age at dispute resolution. This was a house that was loud and very direct. My dad, who I'm sure is watching tonight, we live stream these things, and he watches them at home all the time. He's 82 years old, as I mentioned before. He is just one of the most affable, friendly, wonderful Irishmen you're ever going to meet. If he were here tonight, he'd give you a hug. He'd slap you on the back. He'd probably tell you a couple embarrassing stories about me. I heard last night he was here in New Hampshire for the bus tour. And he wouldn't ride on the bus. He went door to door. My 82-year-old father was going door to door in Exeter and Manchester. And someone tonight who was on that tour told me, you know, your father told us that you could sing Happy Birthday at 1 year old. I'm like, oh, God. I got to keep him out of New Hampshire. I knew that would happen. I tell people all the time, he'll tell embarrassing stories, and they say, oh, no, he won't. No, yes, he will. And he apparently is. But a wonderful guy. But I tell my dad all the time that as wonderful and nice guy he is, and a great role model he is, in the automobile of life, Dad was merely a passenger. Mom was the driver. Mom set the rules. Mom was judge, jury, and executioner, and she liked the last part the most. And the rule that she set most clearly in our house, the most important rule, was there is no suffering in silence. Now, I think she set this rule because she used it the most, so that anytime there was anything bothering her, we had to hear about it. That's the way she was. So, like, when I got to be a teenager and I got the chutzpah up, right, to push back a little bit, you know, I'd say to her, Mom, enough, I get it, I hear you, stop. And she'd do, no, Christopher, you're going to hear this. You're going to hear it now. I need to get it off my chest. There will be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it right now. And so that's the way she was and the way she taught us to be, and it's the way we lived our lives, not because we wanted to, but it's because there was no choice. We were within earshot of her, and this is what happened. So I mentioned to you earlier that Mom died of cancer. She, as I told you, was a smoker from the time she was 16 years old and did everything she could to quit. And then at 71 years old, on Valentine's Day in 2004, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And my mom had been through a lot in her life. She had had premenopausal breast cancer and survived it. My mother had had a brain aneurysm and survived it. So when my mom got diagnosed with cancer, I just thought, okay, Mom's so tough, like she'll beat this. And I remember driving her home from the doctor the day that she got diagnosed. And my dad was going to get her medicine because she was going to have surgery right away. And I was driving her home. And as I started to drive the car, she put her hand on my hand. I had my hand on the gear shift. She put her hand on my hand and she looked at me and she said, I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it this time. And I could tell by the look in her eyes that there was something she knew or understood that I didn't. I didn't want to believe it because you don't want to believe it. And I told her, oh, stop, you're tough and we'll get through this the same way we got through everything else. But unfortunately, this disease progressed really quickly. And by the end of April of that year, I was off at the U.S. Attorney's National Conference in San Diego. I was U.S. Attorney at the time. And my younger brother called me and he said to me, listen, Mom's taking a real turn for the worse. They put her back in the hospital, and the doctors have told us that if you want to see her, you need to get home now. So I took the red-eye flight that night home from San Diego to New Jersey, got my car when I got to the airport and drove to the hospital where Mom was. And when I got to the hospital, they had started to give her morphine. And so for any of you who've gone through losing a loved one to cancer, you know that's the end. They're just trying to make her comfortable. So she was kind of in and out of sleep. So I sat there for a while next to the bed, and finally she came to. And it was so typical of my mother, right? Now, she hadn't seen me for a week. Right? She looked at me and she said, what day is it? I said, well, hi, Mom, how are you? And it's good to see you. Glad you're happy to see me. And it's Friday. And she said, what time is it? And I said, it's 9:30 in the morning. And she said, go to work. I said to her, Mom, I just flew across the entire country to come and see you. I said, I'm not going to work today. I'm taking the day off, and I'm going to spend the day with you. And she said to me, Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work. Like, Mom, what are you afraid of not getting your taxpayers' money's worth? Like, I'll make up the time. Don't worry about it. I'm going to stay here today. She reached over, she grabbed my hand, and she said to me, Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us. I will tell you that other than the birth of my 4 children, it was the single most powerful moment of my life. My mother, my role model, would give me permission to let her go. In fact, she was telling me to let her go. And I sat there and thought to myself, after she said those things, like, wow, she was right. Again, she was right. there were no deathbed confessions. She'd said that dozens and dozens of times to us over the years in a loud, raised voice. But I heard it. And she was right. There's no deathbed confessions. There was nothing left unsaid. Every grievance had been aired. Every joy had been shared. Everything. And so there was. She knew I loved her. And I knew she loved me. And so, as much as it killed me to like admit she was right again, I did as I was told. Forehead, and I said, okay, Mom, I'm going to work. And she looked at me and she said, good boy. And I walked out. And as the last time I saw her, 3 hours later, she went into a coma. 3 days later, she died. And I have no regrets, none, because I lived my life the way she taught me. And what Mom taught us was that in a sharing relationship, in a really loving, sharing relationship, you say everything. You tell people what you think and how you feel. And you have no regrets. And so I know if my mother was still here to see this circus that my life has become, she'd have a number of things to say, but I think two things for sure she'd have to say. The first is she'd say, so, you're running for president of the United States, Mr. Big Shot. Remember, I changed your diaper. I know who you are. My mother would be really, really focused on me keeping my feet on the ground and my head on my shoulders. And she would appoint herself as the person to make sure that that happened. The second thing I know she'd say is, okay, if you're going to do this, if you're going to ask these folks to give you the most trust that they can give to anyone outside their own family, then you better tell them everything. You better tell them exactly what you think and exactly how you feel, because you owe them that. In a trusting relationship, Chris, that's what we do. And so I hear her voice ringing in my ears all the time as I'm doing this. That when I think about holding something back and maybe not telling it or not saying it, I hear her. And she would say to me, say it. Say it. Now, sometimes that's led to problems. Because like that guy at the Jersey Shore who I said to sit down and shut up. That's what I wanted to say, so I said it. It was on the national news. It wasn't a great day. You know, when I told the people in New Jersey before the hurricane to get the hell off the beach, that's what I felt like saying, so I said it. So I want to warn you, before we enter this compact, there are downsides. There are times when I'll say some things that maybe I shouldn't say, but here's what you'll never have to wonder. You'll never have to wonder what I'm thinking. And you'll never have to wonder how I'm feeling. You'll see it. And you'll never have to wonder what I'm willing to fight for, because you'll see that too. And I hope that over the last 8-9 months we've gotten to spend together here, that you've also seen how hard I'm willing to fight. You've watched it. And you're watching it right now, because I want this job. I'm not doing this to get a talk show on Fox News, and I'm not doing this to get a book deal, okay? And I'm not doing it to get another title. I got plenty of titles. I've been U.S. Attorney and Governor of the state where I was born and raised. I'm son and father and husband. I got plenty of titles to last me the rest of my life. I'm doing this because I want our country to be everything for my kids that it's been for me. That's why I'm doing this. And I want you to know that I will work as hard as I possibly can to give you a presidency you can be proud of. Not that you agree with every day, but a presidency you can be proud of. We need that. We haven't been proud of one for a long time. And we need to be proud of one. We need to feel that way about our country again. And so that's what you'll get. That's not just a list of proposals. That's who I am in here. You have a right to know that. And so that's why I end with that tonight, because when you're making your decision, you need to know who I am. Now you do. So I thank you for coming tonight. I thank you for giving me your time and your attention. And I am asking for your vote on February 9th. I don't want to be ambiguous about that. I know you people, okay? You tell everybody that we're in your top 3. I know what you do. Now, there's 5 weeks to go. I don't need top 3 anymore. All right? I need your vote. I want your vote. And I'm going to work as hard as I can the next 5 weeks for guys who are undecided like him. I'm working to get his vote. And for those of you who are with me, here's my suggestion. Go on vacation. Don't listen to anybody else anymore. Just come back in 5 weeks and vote. That's all. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this. And I look forward to working for you and being one of you and giving you a presidency you can be proud of. Thank you all very much.